Bonji Vacorja. Hi, everyone. Eiimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat 155. And as is customary, I start with a prayer for peace. Gomara Siakon ar fud na crinne. Gomara Siakon in our jaili agus in our jirha. Gonari lin lena kuj garmaka, gamuj buikas jiv, je chuvdaka is spirit chuvdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities, for peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that has strained us in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might not forget their tormented brother, might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. And that we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb. That our swords be beaten into plowshares. And no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain. So you're all very, very welcome. And let me see where people are from. So we've got Southern California, Wyoming. Oh, once again, rainy London. The sun is shining here, thank goodness, in Kilkenny for a while. East Yorkshire, on the road from Galway to Ballina, Killaloe, Utah, west coast of Scotland, New York, lovely. Where we have West Cornwall, Calgary, wonderful, Devon. So when I started these, this is the last chat for this season. I'm going to take the month of August off and we'll start again. Season 5 in September. But when I started, the idea was that I would chat with ordinary members of the order, as in not well-known members. And none of them were ordinary. They've all been extraordinary. And I've broken my rule. I'm now having a well-known OBOD member who is by no means ordinary, I'll have to say, is absolutely fascinating. So I hope you enjoy my chat. We are going now to Unismán, the island of Anglesey, to meet Christopher Hughes. So Christopher, you're so welcome.
Good evening, Eiimear. How are you?
Good. So say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Noswaith, a very warm greetings to you all from Unismán here, where, just like it is in Ireland, the sun has been shining this afternoon for the first time in days. So that's been rather lovely, just to see some rays of sunshine, but I think it's clouded over again now.
Yeah, I can see clouds, but I can see patches of blue. Anyway, it's so lovely to have you here and for me to break my rule. I thought, well, we can do it. So many people know you, and there are many, of course, you are the head of the Anglesey Druid Order, and many OBOD members are members of the, are you ADO or AOD?
ADO.
ADO.
Yeah.
But for people who don't know you, never been, I mean, Unismán, can you just tell us a little bit about Unismán and where you live?
I can. So where I'm currently located, I'm in the southwestern portion of Unismán, of the Isle of Anglesey, which is just off the coast of northwest Wales. I live in a really pretty part of the island where I always feel that we have the best of both worlds. I see the mountains, so the mountains of Eryri, of Snowdonia, they're in front of me. So every morning when I wake up, I look out the bedroom window and the sight that greets me every morning are the mountains. So we have the blessing of the mountains, but we don't have the burden of them because they tend to catch the clouds, right? So they get maybe a little bit more rain than we do here on the island. But they're so majestic and beautiful, and they're always different. I mean, these things have stood there for millions of years, but every single morning they look different. the quality of the light on them causes them to appear dramatic and majestic and significant in different ways. And then we have a little bit of sea in front of us, which is an estuary. So Ynys Môn or Anglesey looks like a head in profile. It looks like, we always consider that it's perhaps the head of King Bran, Pendigate Bran from the Mabinogi, that it's his head in profile. And where his mouth is an estuary, a tidal estuary. And I live just above that, looking out over that estuary. And a forest, and over towards Ynys Llanddwyn Island, which is sacred to one of our saints, one of the goddesses of modern Druidry, Dwynwen. So I always feel as if I have the best of both worlds. So my mum, she lives in the mountains, and I live here on the island. And I always think that doesn't matter where you go in the world, island folk are a particular breed of people. They're always a particular breed. There's something that all island folks have in common, I think, a commonality and a trait that I think we like a little bit of isolation, that we like to be alone. We like to have the solitude that islands tend to offer. And I certainly feel that here, even though it's a fairly large island, I feel as if we do have a sense of separation, a degree of separation from the mainland. So wherever I've been, whether it's down to an OBOD event down in Glastonbury or to one of my TV jobs or somewhere in the world, it always feels that when I come home across the bridge into a place of sanctuary. It always feels as if I'm safe on my island, that nothing bad can cross the sea somehow. And I love that feeling of sanctuary that I get here. And of course, we've got all this amazing history, Ynys Môn was significant during the last Iron Age and the invasion of the Romans. And I find that sometimes quite incredulous to think that, the might of Rome sent Suetonius Paulinus from Londinium, from London, all the way up to Anglesey to take care of those pesky Druids who were a little bit of a thorn in Rome's side, and had to deal with them. And there was this almighty bloody battle on the Menai Straits that Tacitus records in quite vivid detail. And that history is seeped into the very fabric of the island, that what would that have felt like? What would they have endured to suddenly find on the other side of the straits an army that were essentially there to wipe you off the face of the earth? And I know that's been a part of people's realities throughout history and to this day. And you think, gosh, humans are fickle things, aren't they? In the things that we do to other people, and that history and the significance of that history has never been something that I've taken for granted. It's always something that I've connected to on a very visceral level. And I think growing up and identifying and practicing Druidry as an adult Welsh person has caused me to feel that even deeper somehow, that historical significance of what happened here nearly 2,000 years ago. And yet it still feels like a bit of a sanctuary. And yet, despite all of that, despite what the Roman army and its emperors attempted to do 2,000 years ago, we're still here. We didn't go anywhere. We're still here. Druids are still here. Druids are still a part of the world. And I love that we're a part of it. And so that's kind of where I live. But I have this, I think sometimes in my own head that maybe I over romanticize it sometimes, but I feel as if I genuinely have a love affair with Môn, with the island, that I am utterly head over heels in love with her. She causes my heart to sing daily every time I open my window in the morning just to look out at her vistas. Whatever I'm doing in my life, she's always there. She's always a part of my existence, and I'm sure that people out there may have heard, or they've seen it on TikTok or Instagram or other social medias, that there's this peculiar Welsh word that is hiraeth. Hiraeth, and it describes a profound longing. Some people might equate it to homesickness, but I think it runs deeper than that. It's a profound longing for one's land that cuts directly into the spirit itself, not just into your heart, but somewhere really deep inside of you. And I certainly feel that for Eiimear. So whenever I'm away from it, I've just come back from the United States, and after like 7 days, I start getting a little bit tetchy. I feel as if I'm missing home, that I want to be back in the embrace of home. Have you got a similar word to it in Irish? To that hiraeth?
No, but I get it. I mean, I understand it. I must look it up because Julia Foyle, she's in she feels the same way about Cornwall, and she said we have hiraeth.
Hiraeth, yes.
Hiraeth in Cornwall too.
Hiraeth.
And it's funny, Uignas, Gemma, but Uignas is loneliness, and it might be, there's Uignas, and there's another word that you may feel when you are away from your land. So Uignas is something that's away from me. So it's probably that longing.
Yeah.
But when I'm here, I'm not feeling Uignas. It's when I'm away, I'm feeling it. So
yeah,
I must look that up.
Yeah. I think that's a similar thing, because I don't tend to feel or be in sufferance of hiraeth when I'm here at home. But as soon as I'm away from home, I feel this profound, deep sense of hiraeth. And I think it just comes from the fact that I have a relationship with this land, and it's a profound relationship that informs every single aspect of my daily expression and of my life. All of the things that I do has in some way or another some relation to the island and her influence and inspiration on my life. And I hope that people can kind of understand that to an extent. And it might be for some people something very difficult to understand, but I love it so much. There's even, we've had the most ghastly spring and summer so far. And I've been lucky in that I've been able to travel to other places. And I thought, it must be so delightful to live in somewhere where the sun is a guarantee, where you can plan to have a barbecue in 2 weeks' time and you know that it's not going to rain. And yet all of that seems somewhat incidental when I find myself here at home, whether it's looking at the rain through my office window or walking out in it. There's still something that is embedded in me that comes from the island. And I love that. And I hope that never, ever goes away, that will always be a part of my life, And I think that's such an important aspect of my druidry as well, in that I have this relationship with the animistic principle of the island. And yeah, it is lovely. So that's where I am, here on Eiimear, floating around in the Irish Sea.
Well, I so get that, because there's been so much in the news, people being displaced, and I mean it's an old story, and it's one thing to voluntarily move from your homeland to another place. It's another thing when you are forced and displaced involuntarily. And when I read about it, I just feel this huge pain when I think, I couldn't do that, or I hope I am never, ever in that situation, because then that would really, really, I love Italy, I love the language there, I speak it, I love the food, I love the people. But I think I would be heartbroken if I had to leave Ireland. I've lived in Africa and had wonderful times there and a great connection with the land. But the more I travel now, since I joined the order, is that my roots get deeper and deeper here. So the pull back here, whenever I travel, is getting stronger and stronger. And that's a really interesting, and I've lived overseas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, same with me as well. Yeah, I've lived and worked in the United States, on the island of Jersey in the Channel Islands. I have a deep love affair for Finland. I visit Finland annually
Yeah.
to go up there on my little writing retreats. And just like you've described, I still feel that it doesn't matter where I go in the world, my roots get deeper here. And those little sojourns away, I love them. You know, they're little
Yeah.
soirees that I thoroughly enjoy. And yet I can feel those roots pulling me back to home, to the very soil and the rocks of this place. And I just love that it feels visceral. It feels very real to me, this relationship that I have with this landscape, you know. And yeah, and just like yourself, I hope that I will forever be here and that my bones will be placed into the soil of this island.
Yes. And I mean, there's a lot of resonance here. Pat Booker, that's the feeling I get, that the elastic cone connecting me to home only stretches so much, then snaps me back.
Yeah.
And then Marion says, I feel that loneliness when I'm away from my home, our circle, our connection to the spirit. And then John King, who's in Scotland, although I'm not a native Scot, I feel a similar relationship with the land on which I live in Scotland. And then he says, I found out that my DNA, I have a Scottish gene, which, whether this is the connection, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I started going up to Finland in 2007, I think it was. And I have this obsession with it. And I've even taken to the language. You know, I'm quite, well, when I say I've taken to the language, I can go into a coffee shop and have basic conversation with someone. But it doesn't feel arduous or a task for me. And it's something that I really enjoy. And I thought to myself, I must have some kind of genetic connection to that particular part of the world. And I ended up doing a bunch of these genetic scans, and nothing, absolutely nothing. I'm 100% British and Irish. You know, my family come from Northwest Wales, Dublin, Southern Ireland, and London. You know, that's my genes. They all come from those regions. And I was really surprised, but then I've always considered as well, and it's something that I took from Dion Fortune, you know, hundreds of years ago when I was starting to get into all of this stuff, where she describes how we all have not only a worldly constitution that is linked to our genetics, linked to our family trees, but we all carry a psychic constitution as well, a very subtle, numinous, ethereal connection to parts and aspects of the world that we might never be able to explain away. And I love that we might never be able to explain away, because I think that somehow indicates that there is mystery, there will always be mystery.
Right.
Love mystery.
We must never solve mystery, because if we solve it all, then what's next? I have that with Africa, because, you know, when I've lived in Kenya, I've lived in Lesotho, and spent lots of time in Tanzania. And I love it, absolutely love it. But I belong here.
Yeah, it's that sense of belonging, isn't it? And a sense of feeling that you are a part of something that maybe is bigger than yourself as well. And that there's a humility that comes with that. And yeah, I love it. I really love being here. I love the landscape. I love the very, because I've worked away a lot. I trained professionally away. I went to, you know, to school and college and stuff in England. I've worked all over the world, but my ties always keep pulling me back here. And I think it doesn't matter where in the world we are. I think a part of us always remains where our roots are. It will always call us home, you know.
Right.
And I was going to say something really profound as well to follow that, and it's gone.
I hate when that happens.
I was just there on the tip of my mind. I wonder that. I think that's just something that's progressively happened to me since I hit 50, and that was like nearly 3 years ago now. You know, it happens, doesn't it? You know?
certainly does. But just as you're talking about roots, that no matter where you are in the world, there's that sense of rootedness. Now, it's interesting. Charlene says, I'll have to explore it more. I feel like that in Canada. Many of us with long roots here do. And I mean, okay, so you're Welsh born and bred. I'm Irish born and bred. And although culturally, I'm on the edge of Irish culture, whatever consider the normal culture is. If you're looking at a bell curve, I'm on the edge. But it's the landscape that calls me. The land calls me, and that's where my roots are. Not so much in GAA and the politics and all of that.
Yeah.
And there's the magic. And Pat says, I've no genetic link with Northern Ireland. It just owns me. And I think there's something about the land owning you belonging to the land rather than the other way around. And I think that's very, very profound. And I know from many of our members, you say from the US or Australia or whatever, in occupied lands, find that pain of that severing of roots and that longing to find them. But the thing is, wherever you are, you need to be able to lay down roots also, like plants do.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not that different. We're all kin. We're all inhabitants that reside and live on this glorious blue jewel that's spinning around, a very angry ball of nuclear fusion. And this is our home. And you're right. I think when I consider the rootedness of place and the rootedness of my home, and it might sound somewhat conceited perhaps to say it, but I do believe that the relationship is a two-way street, that it's not a one-way thing.
Yes.
But when I am away, I do firmly believe that the land misses me too. That the land longs for me to be back as much as I long to be back, and I think that's essentially an expression of relationship. And I love that my druidry itself came from that connection. And I've always considered and thought that druidry is a response. It's a response to various qualities or various principles that are indicative of the relationship that people have with their land, with their culture, with their homes, with their language, with their art, and all of those lovely things that bring in cauldrons of diversity and expression, And I think that all of those things go into the making of various responses that people have. And that one of those responses, for me at least, was a journey into druidry, to find expression and wisdom within the land, and then try and find a system that places me in accordance with that wisdom. And that's how I perceive my druidry to be, or what its nature is something that tries to put me in accordance to the wisdom that is inherent within the earth itself, and that it pops up in various parts of the planet with a slightly different color, slightly different expression, because of the nature of the place that it's in. And I love that. I love the diversity and the vitality and the different personalities of spirituality that is erupted from the planet through the different flavors of all the different locations that we live on. And whether I'm here at home or wandering around the world, I still feel that pull, that draw to the very soul of the earth somehow, as an aspect of my own spirit, and about my spirit, aspect of it.
Yeah, Gabriella says maybe the land is also nudging people to travel so they can get back with fresh perspectives, which then creates new life into the land. Well, that is true. I do think we co-create, we and the landscape.
Yeah.
But this thing about traveling and roots is, if we are to believe that we originated in Africa, and I don't know if you read Brian Sykes' book, The Seven Daughters of Eve. So his thesis is that there was a primal mother, Eve, for the want of a better name, and she had seven daughters, haplotypes, and they migrated from Africa and went various places. And that if we originally, all of us, emerged from Africa, then the people who moved and wherever they settled, they put down roots, and then people moved from there future generations move to put down roots. So we've always moved and put down roots. And I think no matter where we are, it's important to be able to put down roots and connect with the spirits of the land.
Yeah, entirely.
And to let your soul rest there, rather than. It's interesting. My mother-in-law, my first mother-in-law, she was from Kerry, but my father-in-law was from Clare, and they lived in Clare. And I remember when I met her, she says, "I'm 40 years here, and I'm still an outsider."
Right.
And there's certain places where you are always the blow-in.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes that's done in a way that would be non-welcoming or derogatory. I remember Howard, my late husband, and I, we have a house in Tanzania. It's a shack, but a friend of ours had suggested, why don't we buy some land and we could build a house there? And I remember Howard saying to Elias, but we'd always be outsiders. And he said, yes, accept that. And we need outsiders. And there's something about an outsider perspective, how useful that is. The outsiders ask the naive questions. And it's not about the outsider coming in and criticizing, because we've had enough of that with colonizers. But it's about I think a little bit like what Gabriella is, that when you get new blood and a bit of diversity, different diversity in terms of outlook and worldview, that I think strengthens what's here.
Oh gosh, yeah, very much so.
It makes it much richer.
Yeah, very much so. And we, Wales as a nation, we've always had all those incomers, from whether it was the Celts, whether it was the Romans, the Normans, the kings of Dublin, the Saxons, the Vikings, all of them. There's always been outside influences, and yet through all of that, there seems to be a continuation and a presence that seems to be significantly older than all of that. And one of the examples that I always love to fall on is that the Anglesey Druid Order uses an ancient monument in the south of the island called Bryn Celli Ddu, or the Hill in the Dark Grove. The Hill in the Dark Grove, yeah, that's right. And that feels as if it's our spiritual home, and it's a 5,500-year-old chamber. They understand now that the chamber isn't just a burial chamber, but part of a much larger ritual landscape, And it always feels that when we go there, even though we're people in modernity, 21st century Druid, it still feels as if we're part of her community, and that so many people from so many different ages have been a part of her community. And it, ironically, we're the least permanent part of that community. She's been there for 5,000, 5,500 years, and she'll still be there 10,000 years from now, in relationship and in community with other people who feel kind of transient. They just come and go, and she sees the passage of these people. And that can feel sometimes a little bit abstract, a little bit woo-woo almost, until that is when the summer solstice happens. And at the summer solstice, the same phenomena happens. It allows the light to penetrate deep into the middle of the chamber. And when we see it, we're seeing something that all of those ancestors saw. And suddenly there's this bridge through time, where we might consider that which is ancient is so far removed from us that it's inaccessible. And yet when we see a phenomena like the one that we see in Bryn Celli Ddu, suddenly time seems almost arbitrary. That it forms a bridge between the present and the deep past. And suddenly we're one people's, one community, all together witnessing something. And I always feel that whenever I see that happening at Bryn Celli Ddu, I literally feel beside myself with the magic and the awe and the wonder of it, that it just took a structure of stone accepting the rays of the sun to cause a bridge between us and the deep past, and a realization that, do you know what, we are all still one community that have been struggling and loving and living our lives for countless generations in relationship with the land itself. And we're still doing it. So whether we're people in the 21st century or thinking back to people 5,500 years ago, we're still doing the same things. We're still gathering in the same place those people did. It's like, in a way, not much has changed at all. Only our technologies have changed. I think as people, we're essentially the same people. We love the same things. We cry about the same things. We get angry about the same things. And I think that somewhere like Bryn Celli Ddu allows that to come through, to filter through the landscape, this ancient story about who and what we are. And I've loved that. I've taken you there, haven't I? I'm sure I've taken you there.
Yes, last year. This time last year.
Yes. I think we had a little bit more sunshine then.
But we did. And that was absolutely magical. It's interesting. Sean says, that's so amazing, that sense of connection. Our lives are a blip in the lifespan of these sacred sites, but we're standing. Now, Sean is a guide on Ishnok, celebrating with ancestors and descendants we can't even imagine. But there's something further up the thread, and this is some members from the Astor says, I wish I could relate to that feeling with my home country. I love South Africa, but I don't feel I belong here. When my ancestors perpetuated oppression, feels like I'm a legacy of harm on the land. And then Liz Hills, I wonder if that would change with engaging with the survivors of that oppression and asking whether there is a place for you on the land. I'm asking for myself as well, as similar in the US. And I wonder if you have anything to say to that. Because that is a problem for our members who are on land where there was. And I mean, our land was oppressed by the English. So, I mean, I understand all of that. But we
and to an extent, I understand it here as well, because I think when people, if they look at a person like me, they see a white person that predominantly identifies as male, predominantly, not always, but predominantly, and they think that I'm probably very privileged, have a very luxurious life, and yet at the same time, my own people come from a nation that was colonized. It was colonized by the imperial powers of Westminster, of England, and that's a similar story to so many people on the face of our planet. This sense of colonization, this sense of people carrying a transgenerational and sometimes an intergenerational trauma that is as a result of that. And although we have a sense of that here in Wales, we've had to somehow find our own identity within that. We've had to find a way to ameliorate and soothe those injuries within our own lives and living. There's nothing we can do about the past. We can't go back. We can't change the past. Sometimes I think it's difficult to fall into patterns of acceptance when we carry guilt, when we carry a sense of anger or humiliation or sadness that comes from all of that baggage. And I spend a lot of time in the United States. I've spent time in Australia and heard these similar stories. And I don't think that there is a one cure-all answer to it. I think the answers come in drips and drabs and in bite-sized pieces of our own inspiration. And the only point of reference that I have for that is how we've dealt with that here in Wales, how we've dealt with the oppression that we've had. In the 1800s, the mid 1800s, Wales fell under the influence of what we refer to as Brad y Llyfrau Gleision, or the treachery of the Blue Books, which was essentially an investigation into the state of education in Wales that basically berated the fact that we didn't speak English, we only spoke a colloquial Celtic indigenous language, and that was seemingly a threat, and it needed to be beaten out of the children. And to a huge extent, it was beaten out of us.
Same here.
And so many of these stories are so familiar to so many people's lived experiences. And even to the point of my elderly great-grandmother, she remembers the time of the Welsh Knot. She remembers the time where people were punished for speaking their native language, And so we ourselves have been in sufferance of that. And I know that's a really difficult thing for people to understand when they're seeing, a white Western person on their screens, but that has genuinely been a part of our story. And even if you look at the screen and you see my surname has been anglicized. So my patronym was changed because of the shame that the Welsh language brought people. So my patronym should be spelled Huws, Hughes, but it was changed to Hughes with a GH, so it looked a little bit more anglicized. And this was all because of the treachery of the Blue Books that defamed and considered that the Welsh language was inherently evil, and that for people to get on in the world, to get on in life in general, they needed to be a little bit more English and adopt English into their education. And it came with huge swathes of shame. And you look at other stories around the world, where there's that phrase, isn't there, of beat the Indian out of the child, and the same thing happened here. It happened in Ireland, it happened in Scotland, it happened in so many places. And the only way that we've been able to ameliorate that, to somehow temper that, is by holding on to the tiny jewels of our own culture and celebrating it, and feeling that we have something that is inherently our own. And I'm a part of that next week. I'm going down to Cardiff to the National Eisteddfod of Wales, and the National Eisteddfod is a part of that recovery process, a part of recovering who we are and who we feel that we are. And we do that through the arts. We do it through poetry and song and music and drama and singing and barddoniaeth, through bardism in general, and it helps us feel, like we hearkened to earlier on, a sense of rootedness.
Yeah.
And I think, however disenfranchised we might feel as people, or whatever transgenerational trauma that we might carry from the past and the actions of our ancestors, I think we have to ultimately find how we connect to where we are and to the land upon which we are, and how we connect not just to the bones of our ancestors who may have done all those terrible things in the past, but how we walk upon that land, and how we treat, deal, and interact with not only the physical components of that land, but also the spiritual principles of that land. And I think that, again, is difficult, and that none of it is easy. I think if there was a one-sentence cure, we would have cured it by now. But I think the fact that there isn't, and people are continuously having these conversations, is testament to the fact that it's so difficult. It's so almost impossibly difficult. But I think, as Druids in particular, I always stand by the fact that a Druid is somebody who serves to be the meaning of the word, oak wise, or to know the oak, to be oak wise, to find wisdom and to be placed in accordance with wisdom. But I think we can become voices of wisdom in the land as well, and within cultures, and within the way that we respond to elements from the past, elements that are here in the present, and how we seed the future with wisdom. And that it's up to us as individuals to be able to somehow temper that which we feel is problematic with the past, because I don't think anyone else can do it for us. I think we have to be the first point of healing, that if we feel that, like I did with my own culture, I'm like, right, okay, I feel this, there's anger, there's sadness, there's regret, there's a sense of disenfranchisement. What can I do as an individual to help me not feel that way? And then how can I help other people that might also feel like that to perhaps come to terms with it and move on from it? Whether even moving on from it is even an option, I suspect that perhaps it's not a real option.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we must continuously work upon. But that ultimately, that transgenerational trauma is a real thing. It's a thing that, particularly for people who are on the spiritual spectrum, like we are, that it's problematic. And I wish that there was a simple answer to it, but I genuinely don't think there is. It's ultimately down to what we think we can do to help heal those processes. And I always think, that we're all we all come into this world, we come into the experience of this life. But I genuinely believe that every single one of us has a gift of medicine for the world. Every one of us has something to give. And I sometimes I think, people might think, oh my gosh, that means I have to be some kind of really important herbalist or a life-changing scientist. And I think, no, sometimes the medicine that we have is somebody who's just a really bloody good listener, or an excellent friend, somebody whose shoulders are broad enough to be able to take another person's pain and tragedy and sorrow and help them assimilate that into the experience of who they are. And I think we all have a medicine to offer to the world. And finding that medicine, I think, is the journey of Druidry, journey of spirituality,
Absolutely. And there's two things to that. I remember I had a medicine woman from the US. She's white, but adopted into the medicine ways of the Cree. But she said she was traveling down at the Grand Canyon, and she met this old woman who gave her some medicine. She said, "This is the only medicine I have." And she put some flower petals on her tongue. And she said that was the most profound healing she had ever had. I said, I would just so love to meet that woman again. That was the only medicine this woman had. And yet her. And I just think, and it's that smile. You work in a shop. I know I've had when somebody of service, whatever, in an office, and they smile. And it's like there are times when it has just lifted me up. Now that's healing. They may not even know it, or maybe they do. I don't know. And Anne here says she was. This is apropos of of the experience of the Welsh. This is making me feel bad because I'm English now, and I'd like. Can we address that, because that's
we can.
Yes. That is common. That is not that guilt that descendants of oppressors feel. And what do we do? There's one thing about healing your own oppression or your own historical oppression. How do you come to terms with being, well, we don't, I mean, there's an oppressor and an oppressed in all of us.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think it's also very easy for people to fall into repetitive patterns of guilt. And I don't think that's necessary at all. I have people, I talk about all this stuff fairly frequently, and I often hear people thinking, oh my gosh, I feel awful for what my ancestors did. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't do it. It's not your fault. It's never been your fault. And even those powers that did that, what they did to Wales, to Canada, to the US, to Ireland, to Australia, these were imperial forces. These were imperial governmental forces. It wasn't a single individual. It's a conglomeration of people that form governments, that form political powers. They're not individuals that are just walking in everyday life who are mostly completely oblivious to these things that are happening around them. And even if they weren't oblivious, they were possibly powerless to be able to affect them or to have any influence on them. And I don't think that guilt, or to feel that guilt, is conducive to transformation and change. There's so much we can do through educating ourselves to what has happened to different cultures and societies in the world, and how maybe we can help that today, and what we can do perhaps as people today. Because I always... people will use the term cultural appropriation quite often today. We hear that so often today. And I think that when it comes to matters like cultural appropriation, that also falls into these issues of colonization, oppression in the past. But that cultural appropriation today, the difference between appropriation and appreciation is just education. It's how we educate ourselves to what is going on in the world and the dynamics of those cultures and countries. So when people say to me, I'd really love to study Welsh mythology, to study things about, Bardddas or Welsh culture, how do I do that in a non-appropriative way? And my answer to that is always the same. It's like, well, do a bit of Duolingo, have an appreciation of our language, read up a little bit about the dynamics of Wales and the culture that we live in. Maybe decide to support a little charity that's in Wales, do something to widen your perspective of the nation itself. And that very quickly then moves things away from appropriation into an appreciation of the culture that you're being drawn towards. And there are small little things that we can do. And whilst they might seem small, they're actually quite big deals. They can change how we feel about something. I remember the first time I started learning Finnish, and the first time I was able to walk into a coffee shop in Rovaniemi and have a very brief conversation with a person, and I felt comfortable in doing so. And it felt as if something changed inside of me as well. It felt as if, oh my gosh, I had suddenly an insight into a culture that I didn't have before, because I'd just been visiting it, and isolating myself in a little cabin and then coming back home. But suddenly I felt like, oh my word, a part of me feels that I have there's a homeliness to this now. And that was just through doing a little bit of Duolingo, and
having that language. Yeah,
yes,
it's adorable.
Yeah, we can all do that, can't we? Because you're learning Italian, is that right?
Yeah, parlo italiano. Yeah, and it's on Duolingo. I've never had a class, but I can speak Italian.
Yeah, isn't that
I'm
fabulous?
not fluent, but I can. So I was at an OBOD gathering there recently, and I needed very little help with the translation. And I thought, oh, this is, except when we had a Zoom meeting, I need to lip read. But when it's face to face, and they were really nice. They told me I had improved. So.
But that does make a huge difference, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a key. And what I find with the Italians, they're so appreciative when we speak Italian. Likewise, with the Irish language, it's growing. And there's a greater appreciation among Irish people too, because it was beaten into us in school, beaten out by the English in my grandparents' generation, then beaten into us. Now, I always loved it, so I never had an issue with it, but many people do. And I met a teacher of my daughter this evening, and she went to a Gael school, an Irish medium school. And the three of us, when my daughter was with me, we were talking, and the teaching styles are different. It's about just converse, and if you haven't got the Irish word, use the English word. What we want you to do is speak. And even if your grammar is wrong, we still know what you're trying to say. Just like children do not speak with correct grammar. And you know what it is, and that's how it always starts.
Exactly.
So it's, and we have a phrase, and we're going to end with this one because we want to move over to the hearth now. Is Chirgan Changa, Chirgan Anam. A land without its language is a land without soul, and that is what colonizers have done anywhere.
Yes.
And Anne says, but this is to console. I think this might console you a bit. The English were oppressed by the Romans, the Normans, and the Vikings. So do you know what? That's why I say there's an oppressor and victim in all of us. And Julie says it's a case of the sins of the fathers being heaped on the children, the innocents. All we can do is recognize it and make sure we don't let it happen again. Absolutely. So I know there are people who have asked questions and comments, but can you save those and re-ask them when we move over into the hearth? So Christopher, it's so lovely. And I'll let you say goodbye to everybody. And because then we're going to move into the hearth. So I'll send you backstage. You say goodbye, but you're not going to go anywhere. Okay?
Thank you so much for listening. It's been a joy to be here. And we shall pop now to the flames of the hearth.
Okay. See you soon. So thank you all for your comments. And I know I didn't get to deal with all of them, but it's such lovely opportunity to talk to Christopher, whom I love chatting to. And this is my last one until September. And I hope you can join us on the 3rd of August at 7 p.m. UK time for our Lunasa ceremony. And then I wish you all blessings for Lunasa, a wonderful, abundant early harvest. And for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere who are celebrating Imbolc, may the first shoots of spring warm your heart and gladden your souls. And until we meet again, that'll be in September. And then the rest of you, those OBOD members on the hearth. Until then, slán go fóill.